Assalamualaikum. Today our group will present about company analysis. The company is MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad. My name is Aishah and my group member is Aishah Yusrina, Hanis Hadi, Raja Adam, Aida and Afiqah. First of all, I will start with introduce MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad. MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad is sugar producer involved primarily in production, marketing and sales of refined sugar products. MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad is incorporated on 10 March 2011 is Malaysia leading sugar producer. It was listed on the main market of Bursa Malaysia Securities Berhad on 28 June 2011. Principally, MSM operates the sugar business of FGV Holding Berhad. The company conducts its business principally through two operational subsidiaries, MSM Berhad and MSM Peresentation Berhad, which were established in 1959 and 1971 respectively. In addition, MSM also operates a logistics company, MSM Logistics Berhad, and a trading company, MSM Trading International (MCC), based in Dubai. At present, MSM production capacity is up to 1.25 million tons of refined sugar per annum. In 2016, MSM produced its higher output at 1,117,010 tons of refined sugar, of which 137,648 tons are catered for the export market. Currently, MSM operates up to 60% of the domestic market share. Let's start with financial analysis. As you know, financial statement analysis is the biggest part of fundamental analysis. I will start with analysis of balance sheet. For asset structure is a measure that represents the non-current asset and current asset used by the company operation. For financial structure, refer to the combination of debt and equity used by a company fund its activities. The risk and value of the company is directly influenced by this composition. The financial structure of a corporation can also be referred to as the capital structure. For asset, the higher of total assets on 2018, which is 3,648,165. The lower of total assets on 2019, which is 2,980,766. Next, for liabilities. Next. For liabilities, the higher of total liabilities on 2018, which is 1,685,485. The lower of total liabilities on 2019, which is 1,323,285. Next. Analysis on profit or loss statement. Interest rate is the risk that the fair value of future cash flows of the groups and the company and financial instrument will fluctuate because of change in market interest rates. MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad consists about negative 18.82% for 2017, 24.91% for 2018, and negative 660.75% for 2019, based on the net cash from operating activities. The company paid out around 302,882 for financial year 2017 and 290,397 for financial year on 2018 and 19,512 for financial year for 2019. For interest expense, when Malaysia Holdings Berhad paid 25,100,000 in 2017, 43,645 in 2018, which is higher than 2017, 73,844 in 2019, which is higher than 2018. Next is dividend distribution. The annual dividend paid per share for 2017 is 28,119 and for 2019 is 48,178. That's all for me. Next, we will continue by Aishah Yusrina.
Thank you, Miss Aishah Mustafa Kamal. I'm going to present about ratio analysis and horizontal analysis. Firstly, we are going through the liquidity ratio, which have current ratio and quick ratio. For current ratio, 2017 has the highest current ratio at 1.26 times. Meanwhile, for quick ratio, MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad had the highest quick ratio on 2019 with 0.73 times. For leverage or debt management ratio, there are two type of ratio which is debt equity ratio and also debt ratio. The highest debt equity ratio for MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad was on 2019 with 0.37 times. Meanwhile, for the debt ratio, 2018 was the highest at 65.82%. For the activity ratio, we had calculated for inventory turnover ratio for the MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad. The highest inventory turnover for the company was on 2019 with 6.24 times. Next, we have profitability ratio. We had calculated four type of ratio in this type of ratio, which is net profit margin, gross profit margin, and return on asset, and also return on equity. For net profit margin, the highest ratio was on 2018 with 1.61%, while for gross profit margin, the highest was on 2018 also at 8.92%. Meanwhile, for return on asset, the highest was on 2019 at 9.68%, and for return on equity was on 2018 with 1.81%. Next, we have vertical analysis. We had compared MSM Malaysia Holdings with their main competitor, which is Cocoland Holdings Berhad for the year of 2019. Firstly, we had compared for current ratio. Cocoland Holdings Berhad had current ratio at 5.22 times. Meanwhile, MSM was 1.22 times, which showed that Cocoland Holdings Berhad has shown better performance. Next, we have quick ratio. Cocoland was 4.04 times, meanwhile MSM was 0.73 times. For the debt ratio, Cocoland is 15.25%, meanwhile MSM was 35.24. Cocoland had shown better performance than MSM because of lesser debt ratio. Next is debt to equity ratio. Cocoland is 0.05 times, meanwhile MSM is 0.37. Cocoland also had shown a better debt management than MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad because of lower debt to equity ratio. Next is activity ratio, which is the inventory turnover ratio. Cocoland Holdings Berhad is 5.14 times. Meanwhile, MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad is 6.24 times in a year. For the profitability ratio, gross profit margin, Cocoland Holdings Berhad was 40.78%, meanwhile MSM is 0.73, which shown that Cocoland show a better performance than MSM. Next, we have net profit margin. Cocoland Holdings Berhad is 19.80%, meanwhile MSM is negative 14.37%. Also, Cocoland is better performance than MSM. Next is return on total asset. Cocoland Holdings Berhad is 12.16%, meanwhile MSM is negative 9.68%. Next is return on equity. Cocoland is 14.35%, meanwhile MSM is negative 17.40%. As a conclusion, MSM has shown better performance. Next, Anisadi will explain about the return and risk analysis.
Thank you, Aishah Yusrina. Risk analysts often work in tandem with forecasting professionals to minimize future negative unforeseen effects. Risk analysis begins by describing what could go wrong. To calculate the likelihood of the occurrence happening, the negative outcomes that could occur are then weighted against a probability metric. Finally, the risk analysis seeks to predict the magnitude of the effect that would be achieved if the incident occurs. So next, the risk and return. The amount of expected return is recorded by Cocoland amounted 0.1103% is higher than MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad, meaning that the investment will be riskier for investor to invest in Cocoland Holdings Berhad, and um, M- the low amount of expected return in MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad amounted negative 7.6634%, meaning that the less riskier for the investor to invest in MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad. MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad recorded higher variance and standard deviation, which is 107.6149, and it means the greater dispersion of expected return and uncertainty risk of investors who wish to invest in MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad compared to Cocoland. Cocoland recorded lower variance and standard deviation, which is 3.4136, and it means smaller dispersion of expected return and lower uncertainty of risk of investment. Lastly, for coefficient of variation, the highest value recorded by Cocoland Holdings Berhad with 44.6487, which indicates had much higher volatility that investors are assuming in comparison to the amount of return compared to MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad. MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad has the smaller amount of coefficient of variation, which is negative 1.3537, which indicates lower volatility that investors are assuming in comparison to the amount of return. So next will be continued by Raja Adam.
Thank you, Ms. Hanis, for the explanation of risk and return analysis. Next is regression analysis. Regression analysis usually used on investment return. The first in regression analysis is correlation coefficient. The correlation of coefficient of MSM is 5.2007, which is positive correlation relationship between MSM and KLCI. For Cocoland, the correlation of coefficient is 1.7101, which is also positive correlation relationship between Cocoland and KLCI. Next in regression analysis is coefficient of determination. Coefficient of determination of MSM and Cocoland are higher shows that the model KLCI explain higher variability of response data. Next is beta. Beta for MSM is 1.5235 and Cocoland is 0.5010. MSM will be less volatile than KLCI as well as it has a low risk. Cocoland shows that the price of the security is more volatile than the KLCI and riskier investment. Lastly, in regression analysis is alpha. Alpha for MSM is negative 6.8869, Cocoland 0.3657. The alpha MSM outperform MSM indicate an underperformance of 1%, also as Cocoland underperform performance of 1%. Next is ANOVA MSM. The F value of MSM is slightly bigger than significance F. 0.715312808 is bigger than 0.419602846. It means that MSM can be accepted as the regression model represents a meaningful relationship between MSM and the KLCI. For Cocoland, the F value is lower than the significance F 0.32931, and the significant F is 0.5801211151. The F value of Cocoland is lower is lower. That means it cannot be accepted as the regression model represents a not meaningful relationship between Cocoland and KLCI. Next, the security market line. The security market line represents the capital asset pricing model with the X representing the risk beta and the Y-axis representing the expected return. The expected return for MSM is 8.85 and the expected return for Cocoland is 5.04. The actual return for MSM is negative 7.02 and Cocoland is 0.10. Both other companies shows overvalued. Next, intrinsic value for MSM. First, in the intrinsic value is dividend payout ratio, 50%. Next is retention rate, 50%. The ROE is negative 7.40% and their dividend yield is negative 36 cents. MSM current market price is 57 cents. Next is price earnings ratio, negative 1.46. Their EPS is negative 41 cent and MSM book value per share is RM 2.30. Why we have this figure is because MSM CEO weak management and Cocoland net profit decreased because of attributable to higher factory labor overhead and high advertising expenditure. Next is the conclusion and the recommendation based on the intrinsic value will continue by Hanis.
Thank you, Raizada. So the conclusion and the recommendation is MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad share is overvalued as the expected return of the company is much higher than the actual return of the company. Plus, MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad did not show a great performance in their intrinsic value as the company has negative return on equity ratio, which means they lost more for every 1 ringgit of their equity and negative price earnings ratio. This shows that MSM Malaysia Holdings is not a good company to invest in for right now. It is recommended for the current investor to hold onto the share and for the future investors to not buy onto the share. For future investors to not buy MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad. In the meantime, as the risk is greater than the return that investor could get. For current investor, it is not advisable for them to sell the share because it might cost them greater risk and lost their income. Uh, Also, it is a very much recommended for the future investor to not seek investing in MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad as they might will have to burden for the loss if they decided to invest in the company. Plus, the competitor of MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad is also overvalued, which means the whole sector of as whole might be overvalued. Both of the competitor company, Cocoland Holdings Berhad and MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad investor is recommended to hold on to their share and it is advisable for the future investors to not buy the shares. So next will be continued by Aida.
Thank you, Hanis. So, I will be continue for technique analysis. It can be defined as a trading technique that use chart. Okay, thank you, Hanisadi. So I will be continue for technical analysis. It can be defined as a trading technique that use chart and pattern of the price line. It is known as the most popular technique that is used by investors to determine their action in trading market. This technique uses specific data such as market index volume and technical indicator for the analysis of both aggregate stock price and individual stock price. For short-term 2018 to 2020, according to the SMA chart, the duration of 1 month on 12 October 2018 showed a sell signal because the closing price moving below the moving average. Then, referring to the MACD pattern, the first buy signal shows on 3 October 2018 when the MACD line crossed above the signal line. Then, the selling signal appears on 16 October 2018 with a crossover at negative 0.044. Based on RSI's graph, In the middle of September 2018 shows that the RSI line is below 30% oversold line, and then RSI line moved up and crosses over above 30% the oversold line on 27 September 2018. It is indicate a buying signal. The chart expressly showed the buy signal at the end March 2018 based on the method of using Williams R indicator. The graph shows the line is above the overbought line -20. The chart expressly showed the buy signal at the end March 2018 based on the method of using stochastic indicator, meaning on April 2018 the percent K line is above the percent D line in this oversold range which is below 20. Next, short term for 2019. In moving average chart on 22 February 2019 shows a sell signals because the closing price moving below the moving average. In chart, the buying signal shows on 26 July 2019 when the MACD line crosses above the signal line. Then the selling signal appears on 19 August 2019 with the crossover at point 0.054. In early of February 2019 shows that the RSI line is above 70% overbought line, and then RSI line moved down and crossed over below 70% the overbought line on 30 February 2019. It is indicate a selling signal. The graph shows the Williams R indicator indicates the stock price is the selling signal in MSM Holdings Berhad in mid-2019 when the line is above the overbought line -20 and then falls below the -20 points. Graph showed in the middle of 2019, the stochastic indicator showed the stock price is buy signal when percent K line is above the percent D line in oversold range below 20. Next. For the short term 2020, in a moving average chart on 24 October 2020 show a sell signal because the closing price moving below the moving average. The first buying signal shows on 12 February 2020 when the MACD line crosses over the signal line. In RSI indicator toward the end of February, the RSI line is between 70% and 30%, which indicate hold on the period. In Williams percent R, the stock price signals a buying signal at the end of December 2020, through which the oversold range passes above 80. According to stochastic indicator, when the percent K line are above the stochastic line, percent D at February 2020 is mean that buy signal. For the intermediaries, we will continue by Afiqah.
So next, I will continue the intermediate term from 2018 until 2020. So for the 2018 in moving average indicator on 25th May 2018, a sell signal is indicate because the closing price moving below the moving average. So the indicator of MACD on 23 October 2018, there is a sell signal because the MACD crossed below the signal line. However, in the middle of March 2018, the RSI line are oversold position and the investors are recommended to buy the share because it is going to move up. So the next is the 2-month range, which is February until the end of March 2018, expressly show the purchase signal based on the Williams R indicator when the oversold line -80 and the rise grows to over the -80 lines. Lastly is based on stochastic chart. The 2-month range, which is February until end of March 2018, expressly show the buy signal. The buy signal is when the percent K line is above the percent D line in the oversold range below 20. Next. In 2019, based on the simple moving average chart above, the closing price on 18 June 2019 is moving above the moving average and it is interpreted as a buy signal. However, based on the chart 22 January 2019, there is a buy signal because the MACD crossed above the signal line. The next is the RSI line. The RSI drop and crossed below the 70% overbought line on 16 August 2019, which indicates sell signal.
The graph shows the buy signal using the Williams R indicator at the end of August 2019 until October 2019, when the oversold below the line -80 and the rise to cross over the -80 lines. Lastly, the graph indicates the buy signal by the using stochastic indicator. It can be seen when the %K line is above %D line in the range of oversold range below 20. For the 2020, based on the simple moving average chart above, the closing price on 15 May 2020 is moving above the moving average and it is interpreted as a buy signal. However, based on chart in the end of March, there is a buy signal because the MACD crossed above the signal line at the 30 March 2020. The RSI drops and crossed below the 70% overbought line on 22 October 2020, which indicates sell signal at RM 0.5%, 0.5 cents. At the end of February until end of March, the buy signal is when the Williams R show the line of oversold -80 and they increase to cross the line of -80. Lastly, in the stochastic indicator, show buy signal at the early September until October 2020. It indicates that the stock is under buying pressure. Next. So this is a table of analysis of indicator signal. So as you can see, this is indicator from SMA until the stochastic escalator. So it include existing investor and future investor. Firstly, SMA is sell in existing investor and sell also in future investor. By then, MACD is sell in existing investor and hold in the future investor. The RSI is hold in existing investor but then sell in the future investor. For the Williams R is the sell in the existing investor and hold in the future investor. Lastly, stochastic will sell in existing investor but then it will hold in the future investor. Next. So for the conclusion is the MSM chart is not so great in the past 3 years. It show a lot selling signal. Besides that, with average sugars selling the price coupled with massive impairment widen MSM net loss. Thus, the poor performance of KLSE also affect the performance of MSM chart. As MSM will not get many investors in the future due to in the chart performance, and the existing investor will sell their share to prevent any loss. So that's all from us. Thank you.